Ladies and gents, welcome to our fourth session. So this one is going to be more interesting because we're going to create our own ECG from scratch, right? Fantastic stuff. It's gonna be. I hope the previous videos have been making sense, because there's gonna be a lot of application of the rules that I gave you in the previous video on this one. So I hope you're gonna get it right. I hope it's gonna all come together perfectly. So let's get right into it. So let us start right here. Let's start right here. So we're gonna be talking cardiac vectors, okay? Some of you might have heard of all of that before. So let's just do this. So we've got our lead 1 right over here, which is at 0 degrees. We've got our lead 2. So this is plus 60. So this, once you understand this, it's going to be so easy for you to determine cardiac axis. You will see minus 30. Then we have our AVF. At plus 90 with lead 3 at 120. It's plus or minus? Plus, huh? And then we have our AVR at minus 150. Great stuff. First things first. Now, we all know by now, hopefully, that our impulses initiate from the sinus node, right? Now, when this happens, that wave of depolarization travels in all directions so that it can depolarize both atria, right? So you get that depolarization wavefront. Now, what we're going to do now, we're going to take a summation of all these depolarization waves to give us one main depolarization wavefront. Is going to give us, the overall direction that this wavefront is moving into. So let's just take all of that out. Great stuff. So the overall direction of this activation or depolarization wavefront is this way, okay? It's going to about, I don't know, plus minus 40 to 50 degrees, okay? So roughly there. So we call this vector number 1, and please write these things down, because I'm not gonna write anything here because I'm using a mouse, so it's a bit not like, in fact it's fine. Let me write it. So vector 1 would then correspond, because this is atrial depolarization, it would then correspond with your P wave. That is vector 1. Now, here's the fun part. If you think back to our rules, our rules state that when an impulse or a wave of depolarization moves towards a reference electrode, it produces a positive deflection. However, when it moves away from an electrode, it produces a negative deflection. Therefore, if you look at vector 1, it's going away from lead AVR. Therefore, in a normal ECG, when you look at AVR, you should see a negative P wave, provided that that rhythm is sinus in origin. Whew, that sounded so beautiful. And then if you look at the rest of the leads, this is traveling more towards this side, right? So AVL is also going to have, I know it's not going directly towards AVL, but it's more, in that direction. So AVL is also going to get a positive P wave, although it's going to be a bit small because it's going in a, at an angle. And then lead 1 is also going to get a positive P wave, but a bit small. And then lead 2 is going to have the biggest P wave because this is traveling more towards lead 2 than any other lead. That is why we use, in fact, in textbooks or cardiac monitors, when you look at them, you'll find the lead 2 is always there because it provides you with the best QRS, best P wave, best T wave. You see everything so clearly. AVF also positive, but not as big as that seen in lead 2. Same thing with lead 3 over there. Gonna have a smaller P wave. So that is our vector 1. Then when it comes to vector 2, now vector 2 is septal depolarization. Now, literature says that septal depolarization is always occurring from left to right. Reason being that somehow the left bundle conducts faster than the right bundle. So you have faster conduction down the left bundle and you have left to right activation of your septum. Okay, so this is before we get to the Purkinje system. So as you can see, vector 2 is moving a bit towards this side, towards AVR than away, right? So because it's moving towards that side, it's going to produce small R wave there. Now the thing with septal, with the signal that represents septal activation, it's not very big because the forces here are not very strong. That's why you see a small deflection, whether it's a small R wave or a small Q wave. You never really get a very big signal. So vector 2 is septal depolarization. And depending on whether it's going towards a lead where it's going to produce an R wave, or whether it's going away from a lead where it's going to give you a Q wave. So it really depends on which lead you are looking at. So in this case, in AVR, it's going to give you a Q wave. AVL, obviously, it's moving away from AVL. So AVL is going to give you a Q wave. Lead 1 is going to give you a Q wave. And lead 2 also looks like it's going to give you a small Q wave. Then AVF, probably a small deflection. Don't think it's going to be that big. And then let's just do that again. Ooh. So we have P, maybe a very small Q. And then lead 3 is moving towards this side. So you're going to have an R wave, but I'm going to show you what's going to happen next with lead 3. And then it continues, the wave of depolarization continues and then activates the rest of the myocardium. And same thing, we take the overall direction of that wave of depolarization. And the overall direction is more this way. Now, also for the reason that your left ventricular muscle is more thicker than your right, therefore the impulse moves, more towards the left. It favors more of the left side because it takes it needs a stronger force to activate that thicker myocardium as compared to that of the right ventricle. And also for the mere fact that the anatomical position of the heart is facing more towards the left, right? So same thing applies. You can see that vector 3 is moving away from AVR. So AVR is always going to give you that negative deflection. And here in AVL, you can see that it's moving more at 90 degrees at right angles to AVL. And if you think back to our rules state that when a wave of depolarization moves perpendicular or at right angles to an electrode, you get an isoelectric line or you get an equiphasic deflection, which is what we're going to get in AVL. So you see it's equally distributed. So you get an equiphasic QRS complex in AVL. And then it's moving a bit more towards lead 1. So lead 1 is going to give you a positive deflection. It's not moving directly towards lead 1. That's why you're not getting a bigger R wave. But it's almost moving directly towards lead 2. So lead 2 is going to give you a nice big R wave, bigger than all the other leads. So lead 2 is boss. And then AVF, same thing, positive, but not as big as lead 2. Same thing with lead 3. So you see that septal depolarization, because vector 2 was moving towards lead 3, you got that initial R wave, but then because vector 3 is more forceful and bigger than vector 2, so vector 3 just takes over, and you hardly even see that septal depolarization. So you just get a nice R wave there. So our ECG is almost complete now. And then the fourth vector is your ventricular repolarization. And according to literature, it's also in the same direction as your vector 3. Yes. So let's just add the vector 3 is your R wave. And then vector 4 responds with your T wave, which is ventricular repolarization. Same principles. Vector 4 moving away from AVR. So AVR is going to give you a negative T wave. Vector 4 is moving at right angles to AVL, so you might get a biphasic T wave, or you might get a slightly more negative T wave or slightly more positive T wave. It really differs, okay? But you never really get like a big T wave like that. And then more towards lead 2, but at an angle, so you get a little bit small T wave, and obviously lead 2 is boss, so you get a nice big T wave. AVF, positive deflection. because vector 4 is moving more towards the inferior side, and your lead 3 as well, but not as big as everything else. And voila, there you have your ECG. Now, if now you had to determine the cardiac axis or the electrical axis for this, okay, I'm not gonna touch too much on axis here now. I'm just gonna, give you just one example, and then we can discuss that in detail, I think on the next video. So if you had to determine cardiac axis, you would first identify your most equiphasic lead. So that's step number 1. So your most equiphasic lead in this case, it is AVL, okay? That's the most equiphasic lead. Now, this confirms that our rules are true. Because if you think back, once again, I'm going to reiterate, when an impulse moves perpendicular to a reference electrode, you get an equiphasic lead. So what does that mean now? It means that if this is AVL, let me use a different color. And let me remove all of this. Now, if this is AVL, né, and an impulse is moving 90 degrees to that, it means this impulse is either moving this way. Okay, so first of all, let's identify the lead that is perpendicular to AVL. That would be lead 2, okay? Lead 2 is perpendicular to AVL. Let's all agree on that. Now, because lead 2 is perpendicular to AVL, we're gonna look at the deflection of the R wave in lead 2. Because why? This impulse could either be moving that way or it could be moving this way. Because if it's moving that way, we're looking at vector 3, by the way. Vector 3 could be moving that way because that's still perpendicular to AVL. Even if it's moving that way, it's still at 90 degrees and it will still give you a biphasic or equiphasic deflection. Or it could be moving in the normal direction, which obviously is going to give you this morphology. So how do we know whether vector 3 is moving this way or is it moving that way? What we do is then we look at the QRS complex in lead 2 and we see that it is positive. Back to our rules. When the QRS is positive, so we look at lead 2 QRS morphology. Sorry for using all these different colors. Now, for the fact that it is positive, it means vector 3 is moving towards lead 2 and not away, which means that our cardiac axis is then plus 60 degrees. Do we agree? I hope so. So step number 3 says, so you look at lead 2 QRS morphology. So the equiphasic lead is is AVL. So you look at lead 2. If positive, then your axis is 60, about 60 degrees. If lead 2 was negative, it would have meant that vector 3 is moving away from lead 3 to the other side, maybe at about 120 degrees. So then your axis would be opposite your lead 2. It would be moving the other way. As simple as that. So I hope this made sense. I know this, it looks a bit messy, but I hope you were following. I really don't mind sitting down with you and going through this thing again, step by step. But obviously, as I say, if it doesn't make sense, keep playing this thing over and over and over again. Combine that with your reading, and then it will eventually make sense to you. So enjoy, and then we will chat again on the next video. Thank you.